In 2022, a NASA legal team quietly filed a 53-page document, not about rockets, not about ownership, and who might one day control the moon. Buried inside that document was a single sentence, the kind that should have made global headlines, but didn't, because the people who understood it stayed very quiet. Here's what almost nobody tells you. The race for the moon has already begun, and it's no longer about exploration. It's about control. Right now, not in the future, right now, 3 global powers are moving fast, not just to reach the moon, but to secure it before anyone else can, to build something permanent, strategic, something that can't be easily undone. So by the time the world notices, the decision is already made. And the reason you haven't heard much about this, it isn't hidden. It's presented as something inspiring, something safe. A program called Artemis. Go back to 1972, the last time a human stood on the moon. Eugene Cernan looked back at Earth and said, "We shall return." But then, nothing. America left and didn't come back for over 50 years. So the real question isn't just what changed, it's why now. The official answer sounds simple. Better technology, more funding, a new era. And sure, that's part of it. But it's not the real reason. Because this isn't about what we can finally do. It's about what someone else is getting close to doing, and what it means if they get there first. NASA has committed over $93 billion to Artemis. That's more than the GDP of some countries, all for a program most people couldn't even name. Then, in 2019, China did something unprecedented. They landed on the far side of the moon, a place no one on Earth can see directly, completely out of view. No real-time communication, no global visibility. Just silence and data. And then, not long after, they found something that could change everything. Water, not traces, not theory, actual, confirmed water on the moon. And overnight, the strategy shifted. Because this isn't about drinking it. It's about what it can be turned into once you control it. Water can be split into hydrogen and oxygen, and that combination becomes rocket fuel, one of the most efficient fuels we know how to produce. Which means the moon isn't just a destination anymore, it becomes something else entirely. A refueling point for everything beyond it. And whoever controls that point controls movement through space, not just where we go, but how easily we get there. Mars, asteroids, deep space missions, all of it starts to depend on this one thing, one location, one resource. And right now it belongs to no one, which means in reality, it belongs to whoever gets there first and decides what happens next. Here's what most people never hear. The moon has a south pole, and it's not just another region, it's where everything starts to matter. There are craters there so deep, sunlight hasn't reached them in billions of years. Places that have remained untouched, completely frozen in time. And inside those craters, massive reserves of frozen water, locked away, undisturbed, waiting. NASA knows it, China knows it, India knows it, and the challenge is, it may not be accessible to everyone. There are only a handful of viable locations. Current estimates suggest only a limited number of viable sites, roughly a dozen where a base can realistically be built. And once one of those sites is occupied, with real infrastructure in place, removing it isn't simple. In fact, it's almost impossible. Now, here's where it gets complicated. There's something called the Outer Space Treaty. It clearly states, no nation can claim ownership of the moon. But there's a gap in that rule. Because while you can't own the moon itself, there's no clear restriction on what you build on it. So in practice, it works like this. You don't own the land, you just control everything that matters on it. Every access point, every resource. And at that point, the difference between ownership and control starts to disappear. Because in reality, it's the same thing. At this point, this isn't exploration anymore. It's something else entirely. This is real estate, and the clock is already ticking. China has announced plans for a permanent moon base by 2035. That might sound far away, but in terms of infrastructure, it's already close. Because construction doesn't start in 2035. It starts much earlier, around 2028. And they're not building it alone. Other countries are already getting involved. Quiet partnerships, forming behind the scenes. Russia is in. Pakistan is in. And more nations are in talks right now. Not publicly, but actively. So this isn't just a moon base anymore. It's something bigger, an alliance. And the countries that join early, they gain priority access, better positioning, better control over what comes next. The ones who wait, or stay out, don't get the same advantage. They get access later, on someone else's terms.
Shut us out. Again.
Meanwhile, the United States has its own framework, a system called the Artemis Accords, designed to set the rules. Over 40 countries have signed on, which sounds impressive, until you notice who hasn't. China isn't part of it. Russia isn't either. The two countries most critical to this race are operating outside that system. Which means we don't have one shared framework anymore. We have two different rule books being written at the same time. And they don't align. They don't integrate. They don't cooperate. They move forward separately. Now here's where it starts to matter to you, because this isn't just about space anymore. It connects directly to how things work here on Earth. Your phone, your bank, navigation, communication, even national security, all of it depends on satellites. And the region between Earth and the Moon isn't just empty space. It's a strategic corridor, one that can be influenced. Not necessarily with weapons, but with positioning, access, and controlled pressure over time. So the Moon isn't really the prize, it's the position. And from that position, everything below becomes more exposed. A senior US Space Force official recently said, China is developing certain space capabilities at a significantly faster pace than the United States. Not slightly ahead, not catching up, but moving faster, consistently. And that gap is still growing. And it's not just about speed, it's about consistency. Launch after launch, mission after mission. They've sent more rockets into space recently than any other country on Earth. This isn't a one-time push. It's not a short-term effort. It's a long-term system being built piece by piece. And the most surprising part, most people don't even realize this is happening. It's not hidden. It's just not being noticed.
Good news, America.
Because what you usually see looks different. Clean launches, inspiring visuals, progress stories that feel positive, easy to trust. But behind that surface, there's another layer, one focused on leverage, positioning, and control. Now here's the part most people don't expect. The biggest risk to the US isn't just another country. It's the system itself. A system that's already taking shape, where influence doesn't just come from governments, but from something else, growing alongside them. Under current US law, private companies can claim ownership of resources they extract from space, not the land itself, but the resources. Fuel, water, materials, access, the things that actually matter out there. The things everything else.
The metrics are strong.
And the companies positioned to control this, they're not elected. They don't
We must
answer to the
optimize, no
public.
exceptions.
They answer to
Understood.
shareholders,
The projections show steady growth
which
across
raises
all
a simple
metrics.
question. If they control the supply, who do they actually sell it to, and who gets left out? Because the answer isn't guaranteed. It's not automatically the US. It's not automatically allies. It depends on something else. In most cases, it comes down to price. Access goes to whoever can pay more, not who needs it most, but who bids the highest. Which means, even if you win the race, you don't necessarily control the outcome. Victory doesn't guarantee influence. You could reach the moon first, plant the flag, build the base, and still find yourself operating under someone else's system. Because the people running it might not represent a country at all. They may not be accountable in the way you expect. So the version you see publicly, the one that looks simple, controlled, is only part of the picture. There's more happening underneath. Right now, the window to shape this system is still open, but not for long, maybe around a decade. And even that estimate is uncertain. It could be less, much less than people expect, depending on how fast things move.
The decision is final.
Because the decisions being made right now, quietly, in the background, will influence how this works for the rest of the century. But here's the part that's harder to ignore. Very few of these decisions involve direct public visibility or debate. They're happening elsewhere. Behind closed doors, in rooms you don't see, conversations that aren't broadcast or openly explained.
The mission promises a bright future.
While
for
most
humanity.
people are watching something else, something simpler, something easier to accept. So the real question isn't whether we go back to the moon. That part is already decided. It's something else. The real question is, when control is established, whose system does it operate under, and who sets the terms? Because that document from 2022 introduced a concept called safety zones, areas designed to prevent interference, at least on the surface. The idea sounds reasonable. Protect operations, avoid conflict, keep things stable while activity increases. But there's a detail that isn't clearly defined. The actual size of those zones, how far they extend, and where they stop. Which means, in practice, the first group to establish presence has the advantage of deciding what safe actually means. And once those boundaries are set, they don't shift easily. They become the standard, whether anyone agreed to them or not. So, this isn't just a return to the moon. It's the beginning of something much bigger. A shift in who sets the rules, beyond Earth. Because for the first time in history, we're not just exploring a frontier, we're deciding who gets to control it. And the decisions being made right now aren't temporary. They will shape access, power, and influence for generations. The countries that move first don't just arrive earlier. They define the system. Everyone else has to follow. And by the time most people realize what's actually happening, the structure will already be in place, difficult to change. So the real question isn't who reaches the moon first. It's who decides what happens next and who gets left out.